Welcome back to our Pact series. This is episode 4, and we're going to be covering Enforce and dive into Enforce 1 a little bit. This is meant to be a simple introduction to this concept. We'll dive deeper when we get into capabilities where we can enforce key sets, guards, use it for references, and kind of dive a little bit deeper then. But I wanted to keep this kind of short. So first, very important understanding when and how to use this, and I would say the more the better. But if you wanted to see kind of what it does, it's like an if statement, but if an if statement will let you through. If an enforce fails, it will completely end what you're doing. So we're going to do enforce 5 is greater than 10. So 5 is greater than 10. Well, it's not though, right? And so 5, so we can see it failed, 5 is less than 10, and now it's happy. So that is a very simple way to look at it, right? And that's an easy way to just kind of get familiar with the concept. We can actually just get rid of this. We're going to bind all of this in a let so we can play around with these values. And then we're going to call this number 1, and it's going to be 5. Number 2, and it's going to be 10. And we're going to close that. And then we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to do enforce less than number 1 is less than number 2. Should be true. Then we'll close this. Number 1. Oh yeah, there we go. Number 2. Okay, so true. So here we go. Number 1 is 5. 5 is less than 2. Let's just validate that it fails. Perfect. This should be true. So it was a failure. So let's just think about that. So for 1 second, we could think about if I want to enforce a key set, right? So we could say this should be my key set. I can do enforce, and then I can do enforce key set, read key set, and then let's go with key set. And let's close this. Okay, so that's fair. It knows that this does not exist. So let's do this. Let's do KS, which KS does exist. It is written behind the scenes. It's always in here. So it does see it. It sees it just fine. And I did say that we're not going to get into enforcing guards and things like that. This is just to validate your key sets here. You would do the same thing with enforcing the guard. You'd require them to sign it. So, you would come in here and sign this command, and same validation would happen. Okay. So those are just a couple simple examples of showing how we can enforce things. And let's say you enforced, I would never do this ever. I would enforce a guard and make sure that they sign and prove that it is actually their account. But if we're going to go through and use this in a function, we could say, okay, if this key set does belong to this account, let them pass. If their number 5 is less than 10, let them pass. And if not, the complete destruction of that command occurs. So that's pretty basic. I think the concept itself is pretty simple. But what I really like using is enforce 1. And this is because it's like one of the best ways to get errors out of Pact. And so you can do you must satisfy one of let's say at least one of these conditions. That's pretty self-explanatory. So you must satisfy one condition. So we're going to have a couple of these. Let me close this. All right. So the first one is, let's go back to our numbers. Let's enforce that number less than number 1 is less than number 2. Number 1 is less than number 2. Let's just make them both capital. Number 2. enforce, close, less than number 2. Okay, so something in here is unhappy. What is unhappy in here? This looks correct. This looks correct. Maybe it's just confused. Cannot read empty. Ah. Did we did not close this one. That makes sense. Okay. So important stuff. So if number 1 is less than number 2, we're good. So we made this. Okay. So let's actually fail this. Oh, you must satisfy at least one of these conditions. So you can see we must satisfy this condition. And so let's do that. Let's enforce number 1. Yeah, you know what? Let's do this. Number 2 is greater than number 1. Just gonna steal this. Type it. Number 2 is greater than number 1. Look at that. So even though this condition's false, this condition's true. So let's actually break this again. So look, we can just continue until we reach the epic conclusion. And you could mix the enforce guard in here if you wanted. I'm not going to do that. I wanted to keep this simple numbers. We can do that on another video, but you get the idea. So we're going to continue building this, and we could say enforce and equal number 2 and plus 5 number 1 must equal each other. So this is going to equal. There we go. So these 2 conditions failed. These 2 failed. And now condition 3 is, okay, well, number 5 and number 2 are not, or number 2 and number 1 are not the same, but we can just do this. We can add 5 to the 5, and now they are the same. And so you could really go down a rabbit hole. And again, this is intro, so let's keep it simple, high level. But you get an idea of if you want to be able to enforce things in Pact. I would be careful not to use enforce 1 extensively like this. If you've got a lot of things to enforce, enforcing them individually is, in my opinion, safer. If you have a lot of conditions, and I use this for guards, and I know others do too, if you have a lot of conditions where you just want it to be able to trigger off of one of them for signing purposes, it makes a lot of sense. But you can kind of get an idea of enforcing things. You can enforce strings. You know, you could say test, so that's going to fail, is equal to test. You don't need numbers. You can do these validations different ways. That's going to fail. Right? They don't match anymore. So you could do this however you want. This is, again, we will expand on this topic a few times, probably many times actually. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe. I'll put up a YouTube link. And until next time, please continue to engage, ask questions, provide more topics, continue going through them one at a time. And I hope this was enjoyable. Thank you.